So let's get our program underway right now with our keynote speaker, Rick Knapp. Rick is the co-author of the acclaimed memoir, Sons of Suicide, a Memoir of Friendship, which weaves together themes of life-shattering tragedy and life-affirming friendship. Rick and his co-author David met in high school and quickly learned that they had a unique bond over a very life-changing secret: the deaths of each of their mothers to suicide. They were able to bond over their feelings of loss and developed a lifelong friendship. Rick moved to the Cleveland area with his wife Ellen from Princeton, New Jersey in 1993 and is proud to continue to call Cleveland home. Let's turn now to Rick and his story of strength and resiliency.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks to Life Act and to all of you for coming today. I want to share a story. It's my story, and it's a little bit difficult to share. I was 14 years old. We lived in Kettering, Ohio, a suburb of Dayton. And one weekend, my mom was going away to a hotel in downtown Dayton for a little bit of rest and recreation. And my dad and my sister and I went to pick her up. We drove in our white Rambler to the parking garage next door to the hotel. And Dad said, well, I'm going to go and get Mom, just wait here. So we waited in the car. We waited what seemed like an awfully long time. My sister, who was only 9 years old at the time, was getting pretty antsy, so we talked, we played some games, we sang a little bit. And then some man came to the car, someone we didn't know, confirmed who we were and said that Dad would be out in a short while. Well, a short while wasn't very short. It seemed to take a long time. And my sister, even more anxious and antsy about being there in the car, having nothing to do. So we played some more games. I told her, well, Dad probably is having to help her pack, or maybe they had a problem checking out of the hotel. But it was an awfully long time. We played games, we sang. We counted how many blue cars were coming into the parking garage. And then I looked out the left window of the car, and I saw walking down the ramp my dad and our rabbi. And I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. My mother took her life just a few weeks before her 40th birthday. I can't tell you exactly what my feelings were at the time. I don't think I could recognize what those feelings were or enunciate them clearly. Certainly a sense of great grief, a sense perhaps of abandonment, sadness. But I really had no one to talk with. My sister was pretty young. We'd talk once in a while about Mom's death. My dad, who was going through his own grieving process and probably felt some guilt about his wife taking her life and some stigma around that notion of suicide. He wasn't available to us either. I know he was concerned about the kids, and he still had to go to work and earn a living, and how was he going to do all of this? Mostly what I remember from that time is being in a deep fog, a fog that I couldn't see through completely. And what I remember is that some things seemed like they were in slow motion and others rapid speed. Now I want to fast forward 2.5 years. Dad got remarried. He had a new job. We moved from Dayton or Kettering to a suburb of Washington, D.C., where his new job was. And we were there for about a year when he had an opportunity to go to Hawaii to coordinate a study for an unknown period of time. So we all moved to Hawaii. And then in March of my senior year, 7 months later, we wound up moving back to Maryland. It was quite interesting, and I called the school that I'd gone to as a junior to find out where I needed to pick up the bus to get to school, and they gave me directions. And I stood at the assigned corner, got there a little bit early, and saw a teenage guy standing at a corner across the street, and then a few other teenagers kind of gathering around there. And I said, yeah, I wonder if I'm in the wrong place, until I heard a voice cry out. He said, "Are you going to Duval?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Over here." He probably thought I was a real idiot. I wound up sitting next to David on the bus. We talked a little bit on the way to school and home from school. Turns out we had quite a bit in common. We were both born in New York City. We were both baseball fans. He was a Dodgers fan, and I was a Yankees fan at the time. But I have to tell you, I did convert to be an Indians fan. And we would talk a little bit about what was going on in school. We'd meet at his house, his aunt and uncle's house, where he was living at the time. And within about 2 weeks, he had revealed to me something very personal. He was reluctant to even say it, and I was equally reluctant to respond. His mother had taken her life just a few years earlier when he was 13. Well, needless to say, that created a great bond. Here was someone who had been through something very similar to what I had been through. And I thought there was nobody else in the world who could identify with losing a mother to suicide. So we talked. And we would talk at his house or my house, often just go for walks. And sometimes we would walk to a park near us and sit on a bench. So we'd sit on the bench, and we'd talk about a range of things, about baseball games, about school, about our plans for after we graduated. But often we would talk a lot about how we were doing, how we felt several years after our mother's suicides. It was just a big relief to have someone to talk with who could understand what I was going through. And I could understand what he was going through, even though there were some differences for certain. But it was like a pressure cooker valve had been opened up in my head, and instead of letting all of that fester inside me, I was able to let it out. There was someone who wasn't judgmental, who didn't have the same sense of the stigma attached to me that some other people had attached to him or to me. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for us. As a matter of fact, some younger people won't understand this, but in a sense, the bench was our psychiatrist's couch, and we were each other's counselors. And I've said a number of times that in a way, being able to talk with David helped save us at the time and sustains us even today. Now, the bench has other significance. If you read our book, Sons of Suicide, you'll see it cropping up a number of times. But a few years ago, David and I were in Chicago with a couple of friends for a baseball weekend. We had pizza and baseball and took the architectural tour of Chicago. And while we were there, it happens that three of us were sitting on a bench looking out at Lake Michigan. And this friend of ours, who we'd known for 20 years at the time, who we knew quite well, revealed to us that his father had taken his life when Tom was in his early 20s. David and I couldn't believe it, that here again was another friend of ours who we'd known for so long, who had kept it inside for so long, and we didn't know it. Now, lest you think that this is all old news, let me tell you another story. A couple of years ago, we were in Shaker Heights at a dinner party given by some friends of ours. There were 4 couples there. And before dinner, the 4 men were standing around having a drink. And one of them said to me, "Well, Rick, what have you been doing since you retired?" And I said, "Well, retirement's great. I spend more time with the family. We've been able to do some travel. I do some volunteer work with some organizations around Cleveland. And I've been writing a book." And of course, the natural question was, "Well, what's your book about?" And I very briefly described it. And one of the gentlemen standing there said, Well, that's really a coincidence. My father took his life when I was in my early 20s. Well, the subject matter changed. Our host said, Rick, I'll bet you once your book comes out, people will come out of the woodwork telling you their stories. And indeed, some of that's been true. But as the dinner party ended, and Ellen and I were the last ones there, our host walked me toward the door and he said, Rick, remember I told you that people would come out of the woodwork telling you their stories? Well, my mother took her life as well. She died by suicide. I was astounded. I mean, they're at a dinner party with 4 men, and 3 of us were sons of suicide. To this day, he has not talked to his grown daughter about his mother's suicide, only with his wife, and now more recently with me. And I can't imagine keeping that inside for so long. That's one of the reasons why I so admire the work of Life Act and so appreciate its value to help young people identify in themselves and in their peers the kinds of behaviors or attitudes and emotions that may indicate some emotional problems or even suicidality, and then connecting those people with the resources that can really help them. There weren't many of those resources around when my mother died by suicide. So if I could offer a piece of advice to you, to any of you who have experienced some kind of traumatic event, who are distressed about anything, and especially the young men out there who tend not to open up very much, my suggestion would be find someone to talk to. It could be a teacher, it could be a clergy person, it could be a counselor or a psychologist, or if you're lucky, it could be a good friend like I found. But talk to someone. Now, last December, the Cleveland Playhouse staged a one-person play called Every Brilliant Thing. It was a terrific play, and Life Act actually sponsored one night of it. The premise of the play was that the character had a mother who was depressed, chronically depressed. And in order to cheer her up, and probably to keep himself positive too, he started making a list of wonderful things in the world. And when he was young, it started out with simple things like an ice cream cone or a flower. But he kept that list going for years. And it got more sophisticated. And he got up to 100 and then 1,000 brilliant things. Well, his mother eventually took her life. He became depressed over time and even considered suicide. But he kept that list going. And that list reached over 10,000. So I have 2 requests of you tonight. When you came in, you were given an index card. And I would like you to write down on your index card a brilliant thing, something that is just so wonderful about life, about being here, even in an environment where we're battling COVID and we have to maintain social distancing and our lives are upended. There still are things out there. I'm going to write down right now fireworks, since they're coming later. And then I'd like you to give this to someone who's going to be standing at the exit to the drive-in theater tonight as you leave. And a few of you will have a little blue dot on your card. And those of you who do, we're pleased to give you a copy of our book. Now, the other thing that I'd like to ask is a personal favor. If this were live, if we were at the zoo for the walk into the light, I would entertain questions from you. I'd stick around afterwards to hear your stories. But since that's not possible, what I'd like to do is ask you to contact me. Here's the email address where you can do that. sonsofsuicide2020@gmail.com. sonsofsuicide2020@gmail.com. And I'll be glad to respond to what you send me. Finally, I want to leave you with some words of wisdom from that great philosopher, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. And thank you all very much.